Welcome to the deep dive. For too long, the conversation around AI has really been dominated by benchmarks, right? Chip speeds, funding rounds.
All the technical specs.
Exactly. But if we really want to understand what's happening in this era, we have to look deeper. What we're tracking today isn't just silicon, it's the signal. We're going deep into the emotional core of this transition.
Right, and we've been synthesizing these key data points from the Emotional Signal Report for November 13, 2025, and what it captures is this collision between massive accelerating growth,
You're talking billions of dollars.
billions, and on the other side, this very real human uncertainty, the anxiety and, frankly, the grief that people are feeling as they navigate all this change.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. How do we reconcile that staggering structural expansion? The $50 billion data centers, the models getting smarter by the day with this simultaneous contraction people are feeling, the anxiety, losing your job.
This dynamic of being accelerating, destabilized, and yet more self-aware.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack that. We're starting with what the report calls the contraction side of things, the human experience.
And that contraction, it's hitting knowledge workers first. I mean, especially those mid-career people who thought their job, their expertise was stable.
It's so true. The first major signal here is displacement. The report calls it contraction wearing an innovation mask, which is just a perfect phrase.
Oof, yeah.
And the most blunt, just unforgiving example we saw this week was the cybersecurity firm Deepwatch. They laid off up to 80 employees, and they explicitly said it was to boost AI investment.
It wasn't even hidden, it was a direct swap.
A direct swap. That phrase, boost AI investment, it makes the human cost a calculated line item on a spreadsheet. It takes displacement from this, theoretical thing to a tragic, immediate reality.
And the report describes the impact as just intense. You have these mid-career IT workers feeling betrayal, panic, but then crucially, you have the people who are left.
The survivors?
The survivors, yeah. Struggling with guilt and this fear, asking themselves, if AI is the reason they're gone, what does that make me staying here?
It's profoundly destabilizing. It's structurally expansive for AI. The tech gets a bigger budget, but it's just deeply emotionally contracting for the human beings. And what makes that volatility even worse is the lack of certainty from governance.
That's the critical link, because when you feel that kind of betrayal at work, you look up for some kind of reassurance, for guardrails, and what you find is basically a void. And that takes us right to Signal 5, policy and safety.
The guardrails feel like they're written in pencil, not concrete.
Exactly.
The U.S. is still this total policy patchwork. We don't have a sweeping federal AI law. What we have is a mix of executive actions, and some of them, ironically, are aimed at deregulating friction points.
So making it easier for this to happen faster.
Right, like making it easier for large companies to share training data across state lines. Meanwhile, the states are kind of left to introduce their own, often conflicting, bills.
But what's fascinating here is that while we lack that federal spine, you are seeing some sectoral groups start to see the danger. Like the U.S. Health Sector Coordinating Council.
What are they doing?
They're previewing their 2026 cybersecurity guidance for AI in healthcare. So they're focusing on things like securing AI in clinical settings, protecting patient data.
Which is a necessary step, for sure, but the signal here is pretty clear.
Yeah.
Symbolic protections are expanding, we're talking about safety, but the actual core legal power of regulation is always lagging.
2 steps behind.
At least. The deployment is happening now, but the guidance is 2 years away. And this vacuum, this lack of stable rules, feeds right into Signal 6, culture and trust. This is where we see the transition becoming more self-aware.
Right, because institutions are starting to set their own boundaries.
The American Psychological Association, the APA, drew a really crucial line in the sand. They basically advised that AI and wellness apps cannot solve the mental health crisis on their own. They're urging policymakers not to outsource core human care.
Loneliness is not an engineering problem.
That's their message, pretty much word for word. It's not an engineering problem you can fix with an algorithm, and that feels like a direct challenge to the entire wellness tech sector.
It is. It's a moment of institutional maturation. And that skepticism, it extends into risk analysis. You have CIOs raising huge alarms about agentic AI.
These are the systems that can act on their own, autonomously.
Exactly. And the concern isn't just that they're autonomous, it's that they have, quote, big trust issues, specifically these huge accountability and transparency gaps. If one of these systems makes a mistake, who's liable? The developer, the user, the AI.
Nobody knows.
Yeah.
And the moment we start asking those questions about transparency, about human care, the stories we tell ourselves about AI get a lot more sober. That shows maturation. But even as that cultural understanding matures, the physical systems are just
Barreling ahead.
barreling ahead, and that's the core dissonance. And it takes us right into the other side of this deep dive, the structural expansion.
Yeah, that gulf between human anxiety and technological ambition, it's being fueled by just extraordinary amounts of capital. This is where the trend of accelerating really becomes clear.
So what kind of infrastructure is actually being built right now that justifies all this fear?
Let's start with Signal 2. Deployment. AI everywhere, all at once. The scale is just hard to grasp. Anthropic is planning roughly $50 billion in new U.S. data centers.
50 billion.
50 billion. In Texas and New York, that's being pitched as its single biggest expansion. This is physical, concrete infrastructure being staked out right now.
That number is just staggering. But okay, beyond the steel and concrete, what does this mean for, the tech that companies are already using?
Well, deployment is getting way easier for big companies. You look at the Microsoft and Anyscale partnership, they're making it much simpler to run massive machine learning workloads on Azure. So large-scale in-house AI is becoming the new normal.
And the models themselves are becoming obsolete almost as soon as they're rolled out.
Oh, absolutely. Look at Google's Vertex AI. They just added Kimi K2 thinking, which is this new deep reasoning model. But in the same announcement, they're flagging deprecations for older models like Claude 3.7 Sonnet.
So the turnover is accelerating.
The turnover is a feature, not a bug. And internationally, this whole thing is geopolitically charged. China's Baidu just launched new domestic AI chips to reduce their dependence on U.S. hardware.
Which brings us to Signal 3, performance. If deployment is speeding up, the capability has to be right there with it. The models are getting sharper, and they're being marketed as being more thoughtful.
They are, and this is where that expansion creates that sub-frequency of emotional dissonance you were talking about. We just saw the upgrade to OpenAI's GPT-5.1, and it's all framed around adaptive reasoning, personalization, and explicitly trust building. They're trying to engineer coherence into these tools.
But what does a phrase like Kimi K2 thinking actually signal to people? Is it really thinking, or is that just brilliant marketing for what's still, statistical prediction?
It's a bit of both, but the leap is real. Kimi K2 is marketed as excelling at complex, deep reasoning, moving beyond just generating text toward functional problem solving in law or medicine. And the underlying metrics, the MLPerf training benchmarks, they confirm these continued leaps in speed and efficiency.
So the tools feel exponentially more powerful. They're literally marketed as thinking. Just as human workers feel less and less sure where their own professional edge is. It's like awe meeting deep unease.
And Signal 4 confirms the engine that's powering it all. Investment. Federal Reserve Vice Chair Barr recently projected a $3 trillion wave of global AI-related data center investment.
$3 trillion?
Yeah. He framed it not as a tech trend, but as a macroeconomic structural driver that's reshaping global capital.
And we saw the micro version of that with Deepwatch, right?
Well,
Capital is freed from payroll, and it's immediately funneled into tools. That money isn't just appearing, it's being aggressively redirected.
precisely. It's an explicit redirect. But even with that rush of capital, investor coverage is emphasizing both opportunity and risk. You see articles about ARM's volatility or lists of only 3 AI stocks I'd buy today.
So there's a nervousness.
A huge nervousness. The signal is expansion, yes, but it's expansion built on fragile confidence. There's definitely a faint bubble scent in the air, which confirms the destabilized nature of it all.
Okay, so if we bring this all together, the multi-trillion-dollar build-out, the Deepwatch layoffs, the APA's warning, the thinking models, the report paints this one single picture. It feels like you're standing on a massive construction site that's been built right over an old neighborhood.
You can see the progress, but you know displacement is happening quietly just beneath the scaffolds.
And that creates the core paradox here.
Yep.
The systems themselves, GPT-5.1, Kimi K2, they're becoming more coherent, more rational, more stable. And yet the report notes that many humans feel less so.
Exactly. Because we're being measured against something that never sleeps, never asks for a salary, and never needs healthcare.
So when we map these 6 signals back to that trend summary, what does it mean? That the emotional shape of this transition is accelerating, destabilized, and more self-aware.
Well, the accelerating part is confirmed by the physical scale. The $50 billion data centers, the $3 trillion projection, the benchmark leaps. That's just undeniable velocity.
And the destabilized factor is just as clear. And that's where the human cost really sits. It's the concrete job losses of places like Deepwatch. It's the lack of a unified regulatory spine. That unresolved governance is what keeps that fear simmering. It ensures the ground keeps shaking.
And finally, more self-aware. That's confirmed by institutions and commentators speaking more directly about the limits. The APA saying AI won't fix mental health, the Health Sector Coordinating Council developing best practices. These are serious efforts to acknowledge the boundaries, not just the power of the tech.
The mood of the transition, I think the summary just says it best. Today feels like building a cathedral of computation on ground that's still shaking from the last round of layoffs.
That captures it perfectly. The two incompatible truths we're all living with.
We are right now standing in a corridor between eras. One hand is reaching for the doorknob of a world with these ambient reasoning machines. But our other hand is still in the light switch of an older world, one that assumed humans would always be in charge.
Organizations are betting big that crossing that corridor will pay off.
But what workers are noticing is that no one bothered to install any handrails for the journey.
So for you listening to this, trying to navigate this reality,
If you're feeling whiplash, that's appropriate. The velocity is historic and it's hitting you directly.
if you're grieving over a lost job or just the loss of professional certainty, you're simply seeing the true cost clearly. That grief is real.
And if you are hopeful, protect that hope. Tie it to real accountability, to policy and transparency, not just to the next shiny new feature in a press release.
Because the key takeaway from all these signals, the jobs, the money, the warnings, is that we are not passive observers in this. We are actively deciding day by day what kind of people we're becoming in response to it all.